Bring it on with 40 to 70% off almost everything at Gap Factory and gapfactory.com. Matching styles for the family are on sale too. Shop it all through April 12th.
Spring it on with 40 to 70% off almost everything at Gap Factory and gapfactory.com. Matching styles for the family are on sale too. Shop it all through April 12th.
Turn up the volume, strap yourselves in, and welcome to Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LA Football Network. Dan, we're in 7 days.
So close, Jake. We're so close. I can feel it.
7 days. Normally I say 7 days, and I immediately think of The Ring when the chick calls you after you're done watching the bad video and tells you in 7 days you're going to die. Nope. This is more like getting a telephone call from heaven saying in 7 days you're going to get 3 days of presents.
Jake, you know how many days we have left?
I just said it, 7.
Bare naked ladies, baby!
Why can't you just say the name of the song? I get you're trying to make the inference, but at this point, this is the second time you've made the Bare Naked Ladies inference. Why don't you just say the name?
For those who cannot put two and two together.
You know, there are people that are listening to this that were born after the year 2010.
And let me introduce you to Bare Naked Ladies. 1 week. Jake, we have 7 days. And the crappy part, I almost said a bad word, Jake. The crappy part about this
podcast
is if this was last year, this is like Christmas Eve to you. Tomorrow would be the draft day. Sorry, should I not have said that too soon?
Thank you very much, Dan.
I'm sorry. Moving on, Jake. We have an interesting conversation today because I am shocked.
Interesting poll result.
We have gone through this many prospects and this many positions, and Chargers Unleashed listeners and Chargers fans have still not picked wide receivers to focus on.
Again, I'm surprised. I'm not by any means unhappy.
Nope.
But I mean, eventually it's just going to be, hey, wide receiver is going to be the only position target for the Chargers that we have left to talk about. So it may just end up being last by default. So for those of you that have been voting for wide receiver the last 3 times that we've done this, I apologize because it may take longer than you think for us to discuss that position.
It might. But today, the poll winner is all about the safety class in this year's draft.
The poll winner.
Which is like, what was it, like 75% or something like that?
75? No, it ended up actually finishing, I think it was about 77. Still, like, wow, okay, that many.
Okay, good to know. So we are going to go through all of the safeties in this class. I don't see all of them. We've gone through safeties in late day 1, early day 2. Then we'll go through the rest of day 2. And then we'll go through a bunch of the day 3 guys and some of our hidden gems that we foresee being good NFL talent. But Jake, before we get into anybody in college that's coming out this year, why the hell are we even talking about safeties this year?
Well, if we were paying attention to the free agency period, we obviously know that we lost Rayshon Jenkins in free agency, went off and signed a nice big fat contract in Jacksonville, which, in my opinion, for those of us, Dan, you're included in this group, I'm included in this group, that finally wanted to see the day that Derwin James would take the field with Nasir Adderley. The door has never been more wide open than it is right now for that possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Knock on wood. Say your Hail Marys and do whatever it is you need to do to keep both of these gentlemen healthy. This is the reason why we're having this conversation, because we're not necessarily looking for a starting safety to pair with Derwin James. We're looking for more, in my opinion, if Nasir Adderley ends up panning out, we're looking for more of a depth piece.
Or an insurance policy.
Fair enough. So Dan, before we jump into this, when do you realistically, and I'm not talking about the first round guys that you want to mention, I'm not even talking about a trade down scenario, because I don't see that at all in the conversation for the Chargers when the draft comes around next week in the first round on day one. No. But realistically, tell me now, when does the conversation truly begin for the Chargers to consider going after the safety position?
I will be shocked, and I think there will be riot in the streets of LA if the Chargers have a pick in for safety in the first 2 rounds.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. I thought you were going to go a different direction. Okay.
No. I think it's so clear that this team needs a corner and offensive line. Now, there are a few prospects.
There's exceptions.
There are some exceptions. There are some unicorns in this draft. And there are some folks who could potentially play multiple roles and could fill that pretty well. So as an example, Jake, Elijah Molden would fill a corner need as well as potentially also a safety need, which we'll get into. But there are players like this who have multiple positions, who are kind of tweeners. But that said, other than the tweener guys, if the Chargers pick a pure safety in round 1 or 2, I will gladly take 3 shots of something brown with you. How about that?
That'll trust me, that'll be ready to go. Don't worry about that. Okay, so let's get into this a little bit then. You forgot to mention, I guess it's not necessarily a unicorn if we're talking about him at his true natural and position that he will be drafted in, but you see him as a unicorn, and I'm not even going to allow this individual's name to come out of my mouth. So I'm just going to give the floor to you to do your thing here, sir.
Okay, so we are starting this conversation.
You are starting this conversation.
I am starting this conversation with a guy who I think is going to get picked first before any of the other guys we talk about. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah out of Notre Dame is one of those unicorns that is kind of a tweener who could absolutely take on more of a safety hybrid role than just a linebacker. Now, if you go look at whatever the Draft Network or ESPN, you'll see Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah as a linebacker, outside linebacker. Yes, that's what he is. Think of him in my eyes as more of a beefier Derwin James, as more of an Isaiah Simmons out of last year's draft, but a little bit more stocky. He was obviously he won the 2020 Butkus Award, nation's top linebacker, unanimous All-American, but he was actually recruited as a safety when he was going to Virginia originally, and then actually ended up becoming a linebacker once he got to Notre Dame. He plays all over the field. He lines up in the box, in the slot, as an edge. He actually does really well man-to-man. And for his size, again, he's like 6'1", 220-ish. Super quick, incredible in the box, and would be just a bona fide stud strong safety. Now, I say unicorn because he can play that strong safety. He could play that edge. He could play kind of that just overall ball hawk style player, positionless. And I think someone like Brandon Staley would love to have a piece like that. Do I see the Chargers actually going after him at where he need to get picked, which is probably going to be like in the 20s? No. So moving on from that, I think this conversation at the best quote unquote safety in this draft has to start with either Richie Grant or Trevon Moehrig. Would you agree?
Oh, I would definitely agree. Are you done with the Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah?
Yep, I'm done.
Not discounting your conversation, but the last 2 minutes of what you've been saying, while I'm not discrediting your opinion nor your thoughts, I'm sure you probably confused each one of our listeners who were tuning in to hear about safeties, and then you start talking about an outside linebacker from Notre Dame. It was probably the equivalent of having them sit down and play the video game Mortal Kombat while simultaneously asking them to solve an algebra problem. Why are we ready to move on here?
Yes. All I'm going to say is he is probably one of the most dynamic players on defense in this draft. I find him to be positionless, and I think he could be a chess piece that any defensive coordinator can feast off of. Moving on.
Oh my God. Okay. Best 2 words I've heard come out of your mouth on this show thus far. Moving on. All right, Dan, let's get serious. Richie Grant out of Central Florida. This is a guy who in our Chargers circles, we've seen it a lot on Twitter, he's gotten a nice little fan base as far as people that would love to see him in a Chargers uniform. And I'm one of them. Even if we're talking about him being taken at 47, you want versatility, you got it. You want production, here you go. A 3-year starter who finished his college career with, are you ready? 290 tackles, 11.5 tackles for loss, 10 interceptions, 17 passes defended, and 5 forced fumbles.
How many tackles?
290 total tackles.
For a safety, ladies and gentlemen, almost 300 tackles. That is absurd.
Grant is tremendous in man coverage. To me, he's one of those few, just do it all, extremely versatile type safeties. Tremendous closing burst, hits like a truck, super aggressive in his tackling. If you were to talk about a guy that you could potentially pair with Derwin James, that may even be an upgrade over Nasir Adderley currently as we stand right now, you may be talking about the right guy if you're mentioning Richie Grant in that sentence.
Man, he is so fun to watch. And yes, I have him as my safety 1 in this class. It's kind of interesting because when you watch him play, it really feels like he knows exactly what receivers are doing and kind of baits folks into doing things a lot. And then I looked into his history a bit. He actually played wide receiver in high school, Jake. And as a receiver, had 1,000 yards receiving. This is high school. And also had 3 punt returns. And also ran track and field and ran the 100 and 400 meter event.
I think he just likes sports.
Yes, he just likes running. That's really what it is. And so you see that great hand show up immediately. You mentioned his ball hawk skills. Good Lord. He has incredible instincts. And like I said, he baits quarterbacks into a lot of bad decisions. And I think that's where a lot of his pass deflections and picks come from. He owns the field. Every time you see him go like 2/3 of the field. That's his all the time. Super versatile, violent playmaker. He can stop on a dime. Really good speed. He's just like a disruptive football player. You see him coming off on the edge of the blitz all the time. Great in the box. Really good knack for punching the ball out. I can see him doing really, really well in a Brandon Staley system. Great reaction time. Dissects routes really fast. I think of all of the safeties in this class, I think he has the highest floor and the highest ceiling. Put him out deep, play him inside, put him in the box, doesn't matter. This guy is the real deal. He is legit. He is my safety 1.
Now, Dan, that may surprise some people a little bit because the consensus number 1 safety in this draft class, Trevon Moehrig, who, again, we realistically shouldn't be talking about because he's going to be gone, in my opinion, by round 1. And even if it's not round 1, he's going to be gone before round 2. And even if that's the case, I don't see the Chargers spending their 2nd round pick on Trevon Moehrig. But why don't you lead off the conversation as it relates to what he brings to the table?
Yeah, so this is a really close 1 and 2. So I have Trevon Moehrig as my number 2. I have him as like kind of a late round 1, early round 2 guy for me. I mean, he's kind of one of those like jack of all trades where there's really not much of a weakness to his game. He's very good at a lot of things. But I think Richie Grant has some elite traits that are better than his. Now, that being said, he is a solid safety. I've seen him sometimes get a little aggressive, which leads to some bad angles, but you'll see. But the guy's a stud. He's unbelievable. He's a hard hitter, knack for disrupting the catch point. He's always up where the ball's being thrown. He was the best DB in the country last year with a Jim Thorpe Award winner. Ideal size, 6'1", 200 pounds. Just attacks the ball, long arms, and just fundamentally sound. He's just a pass breakup specialist. And I believe actually JKD led all safeties in pass breakups in back-to-back years. He's just an all-around jack of all trades, solid guy who's going to be at the right place at the right time. I love Trevon Moehrig. I think he has an incredible floor, but I think his ceiling is just a bit lower than Richie Grant.
Yeah, I mean, it's still good production for a guy who was a 2-year starter, finished his college career at Washington with 124 tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles. Again, or what did I say? I said Washington, didn't I? TCU, excuse me. TCU for Trevon Moehrig. Jeez. Great way to start the pod. Anyways, going back to that, 124 tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles for Trevon Moehrig at TCU. Dan, I really like what you said when you were comparing the aspects of the elite skills that Richie Grant has over Trevon Moehrig, because I love the fact that Moehrig is versatile enough to basically come in and he can play in a variety of different defensive schemes, whether he's playing strong safety or in a zone. But I think that he still needs a little bit more polish to his game. But he obviously he has enough starting ability to come in day one and see significant action. But if you're making those comparisons as to why you elevated Richie Grant above Moehrig, I could definitely see why you would make an argument for that. Again, just his overall traits, he's quick, he's fluid, keeps everything in front of him. I like the way that he takes his angles to the ball. He's all around it, as you mentioned. He's great against the pass. So I really enjoy what I see from him on tape, but as far as putting him as your number 2 safety, I could totally understand why.
Is he number 1 for you?
I would still rank him as number 1. I mean, again, this is not a scenario as if we're talking about the, Penei Sewell to the next guy. This is much more of a 1A, 1B type of aspect. It's a lot closer here if we're talking about Trevon Moehrig and Richie Grant. But God, that level of production is just mouth-watering from Richie Grant. It's really hard to ignore that. So next up, Dan, and this is going off of the way that Dan Wolkenstein has actually rated his safeties. I'm really interested to see why he has this individual rated this high, and not from a standpoint of production or playmaking capabilities, but Dan, give us the lowdown on X-player, who I'm not going to even attempt to pronounce his name.
X-player from Florida State University is an absolute freak, Jake. I have him going middle round 2. Hamsa Nasirladeen.
X-player is who, Dan?
I was just saying his name. Florida State University's own Hamsa Nasirladeen.
I think you actually nailed it. So
did I?
Don't think the grammar police will not be coming after you tonight. So good job.
We'll see. I'm looking for the sirens. 4-star recruit, number 1 player in North Carolina coming out of high school. The dude is 6'4", 220.
Big boy.
So, Jake, this guy is bigger than Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, by the way.
Not a safety.
But he is bigger than that.
Is his name Jeremiah, not a safety, Koramoah?
Jeremiah, not a safety, Koramoah. Yes, I like that. I would say of all the safeties that I've watched, I think he may have the best interception I have seen on tape. He has an interception against the one and only Trevor Lawrence on the sidelines with his toe drag swag that I was just like, ooh, that would look great at the next level. For a guy that is 6'4" as a safety, he is surprisingly incredibly rangy for his size. There was one part where he actually he had this pick 6, Jake, where it showed off his range, where not only did it show his range where he's able to take it 80 yards for a touchdown, but also he broke like 5 tackles and spin moves and you name it. for this touchdown pick six. Incredible physical traits. He's one of those kind of safety linebacker hybrid, just like JOK. Explosive, excellent hands. I think it could use a little bit more refinement in terms of like route recognition. But man, if the Chargers did not have Derwin James, and I could argue even if we have Derwin James, he would be such an amazing insurance policy and Swiss Army knife for this Chargers defense. I love this kid.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just about to mention that when you were talking about, if the Chargers didn't have Derwin James, this would be an ideal player to go after because I think that he's more in that traditional strong safety type of a mold. He's great against the run. I personally don't think that, like you had mentioned, the refinement, I don't personally think that he could play the free safety role. If we were just talking about him as a strong safety, I think he would do very well. Again, the production here is off the chart. And you're talking about a guy who, thankfully for him, I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword here. He ended up tearing his ACL in the final game of 2019. He only ended up playing in 2 games in 2020. But still, given that, he still finished his college career at Florida State with 233 tackles, 9 passes defended, 4 interceptions, and 3 forced fumbles. What? What?
Take a breath.
I mean, that's crazy for a truncated season and to still have that level of production. Why? Because he was a 13-game starter as a freshman and then played every game in 2018 and almost 2019 before he tore his ACL at the end of that season. But like you said, Dan, his size is off the charts for the safety position. He's tough in the box. Again, great against the run, very explosive. I just see him more in that traditional strong safety type of a role. And if Derwin James was not on this team, I would say absolutely, this makes perfect sense. But if we are looking to fill the free safety spot, I don't think that he's a guy that I think with his skill set as it sits right now would be the ideal fit to fill a free safety spot. Mouth-watering and enticing, yes, but probably not the right move.
No. So I think this is a good spot to take a quick break because Hamsa Nasirladeen, I think, is probably the freakiest athlete. Yeah, it just rolled off the tongue.
Hey, nice job.
Freakiest athlete in terms of just pure size. When we get back from the break, I think we're going to talk about arguably Jake and my favorite safety in this class, but is the complete opposite in terms of those size attributes.
Has nothing to do with size.
But do not tell him that. We'll talk about those next crop of guys in day 2 after the break.
China, the Chinese chicken. You have a drumstick and your brain stops sticking. Watching X-Files with no lights on. With all our Masons. I hope the smoking man's in this one like Harrison Ford. I'm getting frantic. Like Sting and Patrick.
Spring it on with 40 to 70% off almost everything at Gap Factory and GapFactory.com. Matching styles for the family are on sale too. Shop it all through April 12th.
It's been 1 week since you looked at me. Dropped your husband's size and said I'm sorry. 5 days since I laughed at you and said you just did just what I thought you were gonna do. 3 days since the living room. We realized we're both to blame, but what did we do?
Welcome back to Chargers Unleashed. Dan Wolkenstein and Jake Hefner from the LA Football Network. Jake, I'm going to say it again. We are just 7 days away.
7.
From the NFL draft. What is going to be your drink of choice?
Well, it depends on who the Chargers pick at 13 is going to be.
Haha, fair enough.
So, mystery, you'll find out in 7 days.
Well, if it's going to be the brown stuff, there is a distillery out of Texas called Garrison Brothers that we have to talk about. They are actually the first legal distillery outside of Kentucky and Tennessee, which makes it the first bourbon distillery in Texas. Everything is distilled in Asian Texas, and in order for it to actually be called bourbon, Jake, legally, it has to be at least 51% corn, and Garrison Brothers smashes that out of the park by using 74% food-grade white corn that produces a higher sugar content. Their bourbon and whiskey is legit.
You know what I really like about Garrison Brothers, Dan, is that this isn't just your everyday run-of-the-mill type of whiskey. I mean, they actually put their whiskey to the test, and they actually hold an annual bartending competition, which basically puts bartenders into head-to-head challenges to create the best bourbon cocktail for a chance at a cash prize. And I guess in 2021 will be the first year that it's actually opened up to California bartenders. They also were very active in social causes. They produce over 12,000 gallons of hand sanitizer and giving it away to medical and MES services. They've been doing this throughout the entirety of the COVID-19 pandemic. They also partner with Texas Parks and Wildlife to raise money for the restoration in West Texas parks. And they frequently partner with other companies for limited edition product runs. And this is everything from including bourbon flavored ice cream. Damn, that sounds good right about now, and California-based McConnell's ice cream. So if you want to find this great product, Garrison Brothers Whiskey, they have all of their small batch to small barrel whiskey choices on their website at garrisonbrothers.com. Definitely, if you're a whiskey enthusiast, go and check them out.
A family of bourbon makers and bourbon lovers. They are committed to providing the finest bourbon whiskey on the planet. And Jake, I don't know if we can say they're wrong. Garrison Brothers, whiskey, bourbon, check them out. Okay, Jake, we get to talk about some day 2 and day 3 guys. But day 2, we're going to talk about 2 guys who I think are both have one sort of like Achilles heel, but otherwise these guys are absolute studs. And some of them folks might not even know about, which is kind of absurd. So, Jake, let's talk about one guy who, if not for an ACL injury, may very well be one of the first safeties off the board this year. Mm-hmm. That's Andre Cisco from Syracuse.
Yes. You want to talk about making a bang in your first year of college football? Listen to this, Dan. 60 tackles, 7 interceptions, and a forced fumble, and was named first team All-ACC. This was Andre Cisco's freshman year in college.
7 interceptions as a freshman to go with 18 pass deflections and second team All-American as a true freshman. You don't see many players in college football, period, with 7 interceptions and 18 pass deflections. That's absurd, Jake.
Yeah, and still, again, 2019, to me, he was a guy that was going to keep getting better and better. Had second team All-ACC honors in 2019, was 7th in the nation with 5 interceptions that year, 10 passes defended, and then also recording 65 tackles. And, of course, the unfortunate aspect was he only ended up starting 2 games in 2020 before he ended up tearing his ACL when all he did was collide with a teammate during pregame warmups. I mean, if that's just not unfortunate, I don't know what is. But just as far as his playing style in general, Cisco's extremely aggressive in his playing style, very efficient, plays bigger than what his size is. Again, a guy to me who was just showing improvement year after year after year until 2020 came along. But he's great at watching the quarterback, tracking the ball, showing great anticipation. Correctly. I mean, just the ball hawking aspect. If we could put that label of the ball hawk to a safety in this class, to me, Andre Cisco's it. So I like everything that he brings to the game. If we're talking about a natural free safety fit outside of the versatility that Richie Grant is, to me, Andre Cisco is the next natural free safety in line for that. The ball hawking skills to me are just off the chart, and that's the one thing that pretty much stands out the most when I watch his game.
Yeah, I'm incredibly high on him. I don't know if I'm higher on him than most, but I definitely am higher on him than I see his name on quote-unquote experts draft positions. He is for sure a day 2 pick for me. Led ACC in interceptions both 2018 and 2019. 6 foot 210. He actually played cornerback in high school for 3 years before switching to a safety as a senior. The dude is just a big play machine. the amount of production he had for how many games he played and the amount of pass breakups and interceptions is just ridiculous. This, in my opinion, is one of the draft diamonds. It's a risk. We talked about this offline, Jake. He reminds me of Keenan Allen and his story coming out of college at Cal. Keenan Allen was a bona fide wide receiver, first round talent, but his injury concerns are what pushed him down. Andre Cisco is the exact same thing to me. He's a versatile safety who can do anything, single high, box, slot, you name it, all over the field. Bona fide athlete superstar, just has the ACL concerns. But again, if that checks out, many guys have gone from ACL injuries and have had fantastic careers. Don't count this guy out. He could absolutely be one of the draft diamonds of this class.
Dan, just to touch on that a little bit, because I know we've talked about some other guys on this show in previous episodes with injuries and where we would project that would knock them down as far as the draft goes. And you mentioned the Keenan Allen type story. You know, first round talent suffers the injury, drops 2 rounds. The Chargers ultimately end up taking him in the 3rd. Given the injury risk, the potential boom or bust type of scenario with Andre Cisco, just as far as, you know, where does his value lie as it relates to this draft? How much does that ACL injury weigh into all of this? You know, what is a realistic spot that you could possibly see the Chargers saying, okay, this is fair value, even with the injury risk, and we're going to take a chance and we're going to draft this kid? Where do you see that as a possibility?
You know, if he is somehow there at that early 3rd round pick for us, I think that is an absolute steal.
You think that's a steal?
I think that is a steal for his skill set. Now, I think he is going to fall, and I do think he will most likely be there at that time. I am much higher on him, and I would be one of the general managers that would risk it and pick high for him. Pick high meaning early 3rd round, mid 3rd round. I would be comfortable picking that pick because of his upside. Now, boomer bust material for sure. He could flame out because of injuries and could end up not even seeing the field. But if I have a compensatory pick, if I have 2 3rd round picks, I could use one of them on someone that could potentially be that much of a return. Absolutely. For folks who don't know Andre Cisco, go watch some of his highlights. You will fall in love with what he could do to this team.
Yeah, for me, I would probably say I'd probably go a little bit lower in round 3, just realistically. I would love to see this kid get picked higher than that, even if it wasn't from the Chargers standpoint, because I think he's going to end up being a very nice complement to any secondary that he joins. But if it was to me and you were saying that, you know, 97's sitting there and we haven't taken a safety yet, and offensive tackle, corner, and possibly even edge or wide receiver has already been secured, then absolutely, I would pull the trigger there. That makes a ton of sense.
Agreed. The early 3rd round pick would absolutely be a stretch, but I could see the worth and the value in doing so. But if you could get it at the end of round 3, 1,000%.
All right, Dan. You're ready for this. I'm ready for this.
Yes.
If you just like the tales of the, you know, what is it? Jack versus the Giant, or
David versus Goliath.
David versus Goliath type stories. This is, again, I've said it many times in the past following episodes. Size be damned. And that is what it is when you're talking about the 5'8", 180-pound stature of TCU's Ardarius Washington.
I love this kid.
Now, undersized, yes, got it. Will probably be looked at in the NFL as either, you know, a nickel dime back specifically for that, maybe even utilized as a slot cornerback possibly. But what he does and how he plays, like Dan said before the break, you don't want to tell Ardarius Washington that he is not that his size is not going to translate well, because he's going to prove you wrong with that. I love how fluid he is in his movement. He plays faster than he tested. I know his 40 time was a knock for some people when they watched him in his pro day. His pro day could have been a lot better, but I think the way he plays is a lot faster than how he tested, because I think that he's fast especially with his lateral quickness, the way he closes, the way he times passes. He's just one of these type of guys that is always making plays around the ball, quickly picks up coverage assignments, and doesn't seem to bite on the pump fakes from quarterbacks either. And his athletic skills, regardless of what his size says, I think are hopefully going to elevate him above everything else. But he's versatile enough to be used in the nickel or dime packages at either a safety or a cornerback. You look at 5'8" for a safety, you automatically start thinking in the Bob Sanders type of mold. He's not as heavy as Bob Sanders was, but obviously the height there immediately makes you think of someone that small and going on to prosper at the NFL. But and how about this? He also comes with a little bit of return specialist ability, something that the Chargers could definitely use a little bit of. So I really like the way that this kid plays. Again, we're not talking about a guy who's going to come in and start next to Derwin James. If you're looking for just a piece as far as rotational depth and versatility, whether you're looking for a guy who can either play as your third safety or possibly even your backup nickel corner, I think Ardarius Washington would be a nice complement to this secondary group.
Oh my gosh. I think Ardarius Washington might be my favorite safety to watch play of this entire class. You mentioned it. 5'8", 180, but the dude is an absolute baller. And seeing all of the guys he knocks back, you would think he's 6'1", 210. He plays so much bigger than his size. He was actually freshman All-American while being named the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year in 2019. The guy is a solid tackler, incredible ball skills, hangs his hat on instincts, man. I think his biggest strength is his processor. He can dissect things super fast, and he sees things seemingly before they happen. Great slot coverage and in the box, like you mentioned, nickel dime, can play all over the field. Excellent range. One of the things I actually loved about him when I was researching him a bit, Jake, in a recent interview, someone asked him where he likes to play of all of the positions. And his response was, I just like to be where the ball is. And I sat back and I thought about that. And I was like, if that is not the perfect answer for a safety, I don't know what is. He just wants to be by the ball at all times, and it shows up on his film constantly. He mentioned he models his game after Tyrann Mathieu, the Honey Badger. Totally see that as well. If this guy was 6 foot, he would be the first safety off the board. He would be the first safety off the board, at least for me, 100%. And I think for a lot of GMs, that would be the case. But again, the size is a legit concern. That's what everyone is going to talk about. And that is that quote-unquote Achilles heel of Ardarius Washington. For me, put on the film, put on the tape, and it doesn't matter. This guy is a stud, and he has that chip on his shoulder, and he plays nothing like a 5'8" corner. Nothing like that.
No, definitely doesn't. And that's why I think I like him so much, is because he plays bigger than his size aspect is. Again, the biggest knocks on him, I think if he would have tested better, he may be a little bit more elevated in scout's eyes. And on top of that, the starting experience is not as much as some of the guys that we've previously talked about in this episode thus far. He had a good 2019. His 2020 season wasn't as good, but the starting experience, when we're talking about, between a 2-year starter or 3-year starters that have had much more production than him, I think that's the reason that he gets knocked down. But again, we're not looking for that starting caliber safety to come in on day one. Adding a guy with Ardarius Washington's attitude and the way that he approaches the game. Can you imagine a kid like this learning how to play from someone like Derwin James?
Jeez.
Hell yes.
Dude,
Give me some of that.
Going from someone like a Desmond King to someone like an Ardarius Washington would be money in the bank. When I was watching this, Jake, I was looking at his stats, and I was like, all right, his stats aren't really that eye-popping as he got older. But when you watch his game film, no one throws to him. Quarterbacks just threw it the other way. Like, they just would not give him a chance. And it's because he would just come up with balls all the time. Like, there's a reason. I mean, you think about, like, the back in the day, you look at, like, the Richard Shermans, or you look at, like, Revis Island, where they wouldn't necessarily have as many pass breakups or interceptions. But it was because, like, quarterbacks were afraid to throw there. That's what this kid brings. And I know he's 5'8", but, dude, I love this kid. Absolutely love him. My favorite safety in this class. Not necessarily the best, but my favorite to watch. I cannot wait to see where he goes. If the Chargers can somehow land him, I will be doing cartwheels, Jake.
All right, moving on. Dan, take us to the next prospect.
Okay, so the next prospect we have is someone who, there's a couple of these, Jake, that are not technically safeties, but are kind of in this range of where they might get picked, which I have as Elijah Molden and our very own Izzy Mukuamu, who we had on a previous episode. Both of these guys I see as day 2 picks. Both of them play. Elijah is technically a corner, but I can see him playing safety. Izzy is also a corner. I can see him getting moved over to safety. Both of them I see having really, really good traits that could translate to this level. But I have them in this section because this is where they would have to get picked in order for them to be on our team. So you're not, for example, you're not going to get Izzy Mukuamu in the 5th round. Elijah Molden isn't falling to day 3. So that's kind of in that next section. Ardarius Washington, Andre Cisco, Elijah Molden, Izzy Mukuamu, and then one guy who I'm sure folks are wondering, why have you not talked about this guy yet? Are you crazy? Former Justin Herbert teammate.
There you go.
Jevon Holland out of Oregon. Jake, I think we both have a little different feel on Jevon Holland.
Mm-hmm. And I'm actually interested to hear yours first, Dan.
Okay. I have seen Jevon Holland mocked as early as the 2nd round, no later than mid-3rd round in almost every mock draft I've seen. He had a very good pro day and answered a lot of questions about his athleticism. I think he has a ton of versatility. But I'm not sure if I see him as high as everybody else does. There's a lot of qualities that he has that does not scream to me free safety. And he certainly does not have the frame or the bulkiness to be a strong safety. He has a lean frame that you typically don't see corners having, or safeties having, That's usually more of like a corner. I could see him playing amazing in kind of that slot nickel dime position. He actually played a lot of that at Oregon. He's an absolute playmaker, no doubt about it. 9 interceptions, 10 pass deflections in 2 seasons. Didn't play last year. 6'1", almost 200 pounds. But he plays thin and he plays light. I love his instincts. I just don't think that he's going to be a safety at the next level. And that's why I have him. I know I might get shade for this. As a safety, I have him as like an early day 3 for me. So like round 4.
I've probably seen, and this is to Dan's point, and this is just from in general from people that I have seen talk about Jevon Holland as far as where they would rank him, where I've seen him in mock drafts. He is probably one of the few players where he's all over the place. At least rounds 1 through 3. Some people peg him as a late first round picks. Some people, probably majority, peg him as a second. And then there's the others that are on the completely end of the spectrum that say he's a 3rd round pick. And, for whatever reason we want to give that, decent production during his time at Oregon, probably for his sake, it would have benefited if he didn't opt out of the 2020 season and played another full year, I'm definitely sure that probably would have helped his draft stock in the long run. But as far as his traits goes, yes, he's explosive. Yes, he's athletic. I think he has a well-rounded game, covers the slot really, really well, plays very aggressively. But as Dan mentioned, very, very thin frame. If you're talking about battling someone for position, it's going to be a little bit tougher for him at the next level. He's got some inconsistencies that show up on tape. The ball skills are there, and that's definitely going to hold a lot of weight for any teams that are looking to consider him. Comes with a lot of upside, but he may need a little bit more time than people expect to develop.
100%. I agree.
Now, to Dan's argument, I would probably have Jevon Holland ranked as a second-round pick. But that's me. But that's just to the point of everybody's ranking that I've seen for Jevon Holland is just all over the place. It's insane. There's always a handful of players that get that label where you can't fully get a grasp of where their draft stock is or where people feel that they are. I lock him in as a late second round. I don't think that he's getting out of the second round. I think some team, if you want to talk about, the Green Bay Packers, for example, I think they would possibly take a chance on him. But just as far as his overall game goes, it's hard to get a beat to see where Jevon Holland's going to go.
It is. I like him as a person. I think he is great. I really like what he did at Oregon.
You spoke with him.
I just have a hard time believing that he is going to translate those skills into the NFL at the same cadence as he did. But I love to be proven wrong. Please prove me wrong, Jevon Holland. I hope to see you ball out in the NFL. Now, Jake, we just got through kind of the day 2 cluster of all of the guys who could be going in that position. Hamsa Nasirladeen, Ardarius Washington, Cisco, Elijah Molden, Izzy Mukuamu, Jevon Holland. After the break, we're going to start getting into some of these diamonds in the rough material that some guys may have never heard of. Some of you may see them as much better than we do. Some may be much worse. But there are some dudes in this next segment, Jake, that I cannot wait to discuss. One of which hits like a Mack truck F350. We'll talk about the day 3 prospects of the safety class when we come back on Chargers Unleashed.
Spring it on with 40 to 70% off almost everything at Gap Factory and GapFactory.com. Matching styles for the family are on sale too. Shop it all through April 12th.
We can go if we want to. Night is young and so am I. And we can just feel.
Welcome back to Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LA Football Network, continuing our discussion on our draft prospect deep dive, talking nothing but safeties today. And Dan just mentioned, we had wrapped up the day 2 prospects. There was one that he forgot to mention because I would put this individual as a fringe day 2/day 3. I've seen rankings between rounds 3 and 4. I personally think that his game has elevated him up to that day 2 status. But USC safety Talanoa Hufanga. If you need any more description about him, there is a YouTube video that's basically a highlight reel for Hufanga that basically labels him as the Trojan missile. That's a good start. Dan, did you also know this? Talk about, we've talked about all these guys that have had these, former track stars or other sports that they play throughout college. Listen to this. In high school, Hufanga played quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and DB in high school. In high school.
What didn't he play?
Exactly. At anything but the water boy, essentially, Hufanga was doing, it seemed like, in high school. But by the time that he ended up getting to college, ended up his freshman season was unfortunately shortened due to him breaking his collarbone. So he had a shortened freshman season, but as a sophomore came back and just became a violent tackler. Ended up racking up 90 tackles, 7.5 for loss, 3 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, earned all Pac-12 third team recognition. Then to top that off, comes back in 2020, even in a truncated year. This time he earns all first team Pac-12, Defensive Player of the Year in the Pac-12, and led the Pac-12 in solo tackles and interceptions. And to me, he rounded out his game more because he wasn't just a surefire tackler. He just became more of what you want to see from a safety, a well-rounded playmaker in general. And I think that he's another one of these guys that's getting underrated a little bit. I think he plays more with a complete game. His coverage assignments are good. Again, is always around the ball. The violent way that he plays the game for someone at the safety position is there. Tackles in the open field, he makes it. Explosiveness, he's got it. The run aspect of his game is probably his highest trait as far as what he could play. So immediately you're going to think that he's more in the frame of the strong safety in the box type of a guy. But I think his skill set and his traits are more complete, and he's got enough versatility and range that if you wanted to say, I need someone with ball skills to go play free safety, Hufanga is going to be able to do that.
You know, it is crazy to me. He seems like he can kind of just stuff the stat sheet for
production's there.
Yeah, I mean, as a career, 200 tackles, more than 200 tackles, 16 and a half tackles for loss, and almost 7 sacks. As a safety, that's pretty darn good. You watched a lot more tape than I did, but just looking at his stats alone, I'm like, he seems like he could do many, many things and would be a great depth piece for any NFL squad.
Definitely, Dan. So now, Dan has a safety that he wants to talk about. That's one of his personal favorites, as he would probably say the diamond or the gem. Mm-hmm. Dan, tell us a little bit about Paris Ford.
Oh, man, folks are sleeping on Paris Ford. This is not a Ford Taurus. This is not a Ford Focus. This is like an F-350 Mack truck. You put on the film, this guy has a nasty streak and arguably is the hardest hitting safety in the entire draft. This guy is physical, 6 foot, 190, but plays like 6'3", 220. Excellent reaction time, incredible in the box as run support, great tackler. You hear his tackles more than you see them, which says how hard he's hitting folks. I guarantee you there have been wide receivers and running backs who have needed ice baths just because of him. You put on the tape, he's all over the field. Now, the only knock on him, and I'll be completely transparent, is he plays with his hair on fire, but oftentimes cannot extinguish the flame. And with that, he can get caught looking back at the line of scrimmage, can overreact, can over pursue, have bad angles sometimes. But man, get him with the right coach and get his head on straight. Dude, I do not want to get hit by him ever. Paris Ford, I love. I would love if he could be a day 3 pick from the Chargers, round 4, round 5, something like that. Oh, man, that would be fun. Give Brandon Staley this guy. Ronaldo Hill would love it.
Very interesting, Dan. Well, I mean, your statement as far as him being round 4, I think is extremely realistic, because I'd be interested to know, A, where you had him ranked prior to his pro day, because the pro day definitely was not a good demonstration for Paris Ford. Only ran 4.9 and 4.83 for both of his 40 times. Not the best when you're
Not
looking
good.
at not the best when you're looking at a safety. So, I usually always want to bring this question out when it comes to the gems because, or as you call them, Dan, the diamonds of this draft, and some people that, some of the players that people may be sleeping on. So you're saying you would love to get him in round 4.
Well,
Realistically, where do you see him going?
I mean, round 4 might be a little rich. I mean, I think he's probably going to go somewhere in the 5-6 range. I would be perfectly content getting him in round 5. No problem at all. But most likely, probably is going to be round 6. But again, I am higher on him than most. And that's fine. I don't mind putting my neck out there. I think he has the capability of being a very, very good and impactful safety if he could just get kind of that football IQ and get that aggression under control, because his instincts get the best of him. But if you can throttle that back a bit, this guy is solid, man.
Duly noted. Awesome. Well, we'll see if your prediction ends up reigning true there, Dan. So moving on, another safety, this time out of Auburn. Dan, take the floor as it relates to Jamien Sherwood.
Jamien Sherwood. Okay, this guy's pretty jacked. 6'2", 215. He is the prototypical box safety specialist. Super long arms. And because of that, he takes up a ton of space. His wingspan is ridiculous. Had 75 total tackles last year. Very versatile. He's kind of like that chess piece. You could put him on a tight end. You could put him at deep safety, put him in the slot. He is a bit slow, at least when it comes to his 40. I think he ran like a 4.8 or 4.7 something. But when you watch him, he plays a lot faster than that. He has kind of that hybrid linebacker safety role. He actually mentioned in a recent interview that he admires the play style of Derwin James and Justin Simmons. So that's kind of what you would see from him. He is much better in run support than deep coverage. So I think for this team, he'd probably be more of like a sub package guy. But he still has talent, and the dude can thump. I really like what he can bring. Physicality, sure tackler, box safety specialist, Jamien Sherwood at Auburn, day 3 prospect. Absolutely.
Yeah, again, and much like the issue with Ford, it's the speed. And then for me, he didn't end up starting for Auburn until his junior year in 2020. And even so, I mean, still finishing what he finished with was admirable. I think it's the aspect of the starting experience, the lack thereof, and then couple that with the speed that just has me hesitant. But again, if you're talking about someone who you want as a depth piece and long-term development, there's definitely traits there that you could see for a long term if you have the right coaching staff to develop a player like Sherwood. One of the guys I want to talk about real quick, Dan, and I know that he was not on our initial list here, but I would be remiss if I did not talk about him, is Damar Hamlin, safety out of Pittsburgh. I really like what I see from Damar Hamlin. And I think when it comes to his game, this is another aspect as far as the experience goes. Hamlin was a 3-year starter, and then 2020 ended up having a very nice season. 66 total tackles, 3.5 for a loss, 2 interceptions, 7 pass broken up. I really like the instincts of Hamlin. I like the way that I like his coverage when it comes to quarterbacks, the way he plays over the middle of the field. Great hand usage, very, very high football IQ, terrific instincts and playmaking ability. He's not the most athletic safety, definitely not that. So he does have his, he does have some limitations when it comes to his overall athleticism. But if you're talking about a guy who you could take a flare on day 3, and again, in this circumstance, for the Chargers having Nasir Adderley and Derwin James as their projected starting safeties, you could have a guy like this flourish in your defensive schemes, whether it's a zone system or it's a man-to-man coverage. I don't care. I just love the way that he plays. I I love his disciplined acumen that he plays with as far as his assignments goes. I really like what I see when I put on the film of DeMar Hamlin for a long-term, not just depth piece, but someone who could possibly even eventually take a starting role down the line.
Interesting. So where would you see him getting drafted realistically?
I'd probably start at the 5th round. Realistically, I would say that would be a good spot for him.
Interesting. Okay. So there's a few other guys I want to talk about. We're rounding out the day 3 guys. And again, there are a ton of safeties in this class, but I have a few, Jake has a few, just provide a few of these guys to keep an eye out for, because some of them I think are going to go faster and earlier than folks may believe or be led on to believe. A couple real quick, Jake, for me. I have Caden Sterns out of Texas.
Mm-hmm.
I've got Divine Deablo and James Wiggins as a few guys. I think those are both on yours as well.
Mm-hmm.
Caden Sterns out of Texas. This guy, he's big, 6'1", 205, really good length. I think his nickname is like the Wolf at Texas. Makes up ground really, really quick, sideline to sideline in a hurry. Really good hands, deceptively fast actually. Could add a few pounds, I think would help him a bit. But the problem for me though, Jake, is that he just doesn't have many turnovers, and there's not many big flashes on his tape. And I think probably the biggest concern for me is that his best year was a freshman, and then he seemed to have not gotten any better since then. So I don't know he's kind of one of those anomalies. I don't know what to think of him. Like he's smart, but I just don't know if he is too timid or too reserved or too risk averse.
Yeah, I mean, he went through a little bit of adversity, in his college year. He had some injuries that he had to battle. And like you mentioned, Dan, the freshman year was his breakout year. He had 4 interceptions from there, but then in his final 2 years, only got 1. So only 5 total interceptions through his first 3 years. Now, of course, interceptions aren't everything. To Sterns' credit, he still finished with 173 tackles and 2 sacks. But yes, as far as just somebody who's going to need work, I think that is the appropriate sentence as it relates to Caden Sterns. He's definitely, there's inconsistencies to his game, and they're just going to need to be refined at the next level. So as we've said with a number of different guys so far, if you can put him in the right system with the right defensive-minded coach, and in the Chargers case, they seemingly have 2 of them, if you're talking about Brandon Staley and Ronaldo Hill, this would be the perfect scenario for Caden Sterns to sit, to learn, and develop his game and refine it at the next level.
Yep. Another guy, Jake, this is another one because of injuries, has gotten pushed down a lot of draft boards. James Wiggins out of Cincinnati tore his ACL and missed the entire 2019 season. But man, he is super aggressive, super athletic. I think he's about 210, 6 foot or so, has that unique combination of size, speed, and athleticism. I really, really like his instincts. Kind of a compact frame, pretty good in coverage, but dang, is he a ball hawk. A little stiff at times, and I don't think he's really good at changing directions quickly. I think he's someone's going to take a flyer on because of just his freak combination of speed and athleticism. But the concerns are real, and you don't know what you're going to get from that.
I see him as far as if we're just talking about his overall skill set, as far as what he's good at, the short answer is he's good at a lot. He's definitely a jack of all trades type of guy. If you were saying that you wanted him to be responsible for handling his assignments in coverage, or if you wanted him dropping down and playing in man coverage, he can do that. But to your point, Dan, it's the I don't know if he's hit his ceiling yet, I guess is the best way to see it, especially from an athletic standpoint. is he going to be able to take on some of these bigger guys at the next level? I'm not sure. As you mentioned, he also has battled some injury history throughout his time in college. So how much is that going to affect his career at the next level? I don't know. So it's another one of those, as you put it, anomaly scenarios. Like we did with a guy like Ferris Ford. Where do you see James Wiggins' conversation begin?
I mean, 6, 7, something like that.
That's fair.
It's tough. It's tough because the concerns are glaring, but he also has a ton of upside. Where would you put him?
It's probably, where do you start having the conversation? It's no higher than the 6th round, and probably if you wanted to get specific, probably after the midpoint of the 6th round, probably at best. That's where I'd start.
Yep. Yeah, early 6 is probably be where I would see a team, or I would want my team to start targeting him. Someone could very well reach for him in like the late 5th, middle of day 3 kind of thing. But there are other guys that I would take before him that are probably going to be around at that time.
Dan, we got a few others before we close out here. Let's talk about them.
Let's do it. So, Jake, probably my favorite name of this entire safety class, Divine Deablo, I think is how you pronounce it, right?
Mm-hmm.
6'3", almost 230 pounds. Former wide receiver, actually, from Virginia Tech. Dude already picked off Trevor Lawrence. Hard-nosed, great box safety. Another one of those kind of hybrid safety linebacker role. Kind of has that like Cam Chancellor vibe a little bit. Come out of Virginia Tech. More of a zone player, I think, than man. So I don't necessarily know if I would see him fitting with the Chargers. Great in run support. Really hard-nosed player. I like him. I don't think he's a fit for us, but the dude is a freak athlete and is huge.
Yeah, it definitely, the size for him just screams the traditional strong safety type of a mold. I mean, he's even heavy enough to where if you wanted to take him, much like we did with Kaiser White, and take it from a safety position and move him to a linebacker, you may be able to pull that off with Divine Deablo. But another high production, very well experienced safety out of West Virginia. He played 4 years for them, still ended up starting for 2019 and 2020, but still got a lot of playing experience for his 4 years there at college. And again, the production, fantastic. 206 tackles, 12.5 tackles for a loss, 3 forced fumbles, and 6 interceptions. And again, as Dan was saying, he can be effective in coverage. He can play patiently as far as his football IQs go. Can quickly diagnose plays when it comes to his football IQ. I like the way that he sticks to his assignments. But the athleticism that you'd want to see from a guy that's that size, I think suffers a little bit. And I think that's why he's only strictly limited to what you would use probably as a strong safety role. Again, if we didn't have Derwin James and you wanted someone for a long-term development role to be your strong safety in the next 2 years or so, Divine Deablo could definitely be a possibility for that. But I don't see the Chargers possibly being the best fit for him. No,
me neither. We have gone through a ton of guys. I feel like we talked to 15 or so in this.
Has it been that many?
Are there any others that we have missed that you feel we need to have folks know about?
I'm sure there is, and people will probably call us out for it.
2 guys, Jamar Johnson, Tyree Gilespee. I think those are my 2 others that I like. I see day 3 potential. There are other guys I like more, but they are also in the guys to know. Jamar Johnson, I really like him, but man, he sucks at tackling. And as a safety, you just can't have that. But he tracks the ball really well. Definitely a ball hawk, but he's not someone you want to help you tackle anyone. Tyree Gilespee, I think he's just a really good, well-rounded player. The stats aren't there, but super versatile, excellent tackler. I can see him being great special teams in the interim. Can probably play both strong and free. I like his versatility. He's about 6 foot, 205. I like Tyree Gilespee out of Missouri. Those are the only two other guys that I had asterisks around. I kind of like him.
I'd probably say one of the only other ones that we missed. Again, there's going to be more, so curse me if you must for not dropping a player that you were hoping to hear on this podcast. Probably Eric Burrell, and I say that just from a standpoint of the experience and production that he was able to put up during his time at Wisconsin. Again, this is a guy who made 48 appearances and 26 starts over his time in Wisconsin. Great starting experience. And when it comes to his play against the pass, I think it's very, very good as far as his anticipation, tracking the ball where it goes. Another high football IQ type of a guy. And what really knocks him, though, is that it's the small frame. And is he going to be overwhelmed by wide receivers or tight ends at the next level? He's not the greatest athlete on tape. So these are some of the reasons why I think you're going to see, him possibly as a day 3 option for somebody in the later rounds. Who knows? But still a guy with nice experience and good starting acumen, and how he plays on the ball and decent production. I'd be interested to see where he ends up going.
Whew. Jake,
take a breath, sir.
I think we both deserve a stiff drink from Garrison Brothers, huh?
Garrison Brothers. Send it.
My goodness. This was far more fun than I was actually expecting when we thought that we were going to be talking about safeties. And it also is a far more applicable conversation for us to have for this team for how our free agency period went. I really have no clue how this is going to go come draft weekend. After rounds 1, the Chargers could theoretically go safety rounds 2 through 7. I wouldn't be surprised.
For only certain prospects in round 2, however.
Agreed.
Yes. Don't get it twisted in your little mind there, as twisted as a take of Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah.
Okay, fine. Jake, we are 7 days away, dude. 7 days. Do you think that the wide receiver group is going to be the next?
I don't know, man. I give up. I'm still going to put up the poll because there's 2 positions that we have not really talked about yet as far as a focus for the Chargers in this draft, and that's tight end and wide receiver. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm thinking that people are going to want to know about, the Hunter Longs of the world and the Tommy Trembles of the world more than they want to talk about the wide receivers. And if that's the case, that's completely fine. I'm just shocked that it's going to take us this long to delve into this deep, deep, deep wide receiver class.
Man, I wonder if we put wide receiver and place kicker or placeholder, who would win?
Tyler from Guilty as Charged would definitely say kicker.
Absolutely.
He would definitely say kicker. No question.
Oh, man. Guys, thank you so much for listening to Chargers Unleashed. Jake and I appreciate it. Give us a follow. Give us a subscribe. We're also on YouTube for future podcast and episodes with special guests. We really, really do appreciate all the support you guys have given us. Find us on YouTube, find us on Patreon, find us on Twitter, Instagram, you name it. We are here for you, Chargers fans. We are just 1 week away from popping champagne, finding out who the Chargers are going to have on their team next year. Jake, I cannot wait. Let's go, baby.
The anticipation is palpable, and it's going to continue to get either better or worse, depending on what your mental problems are as it relates to the NFL draft. If you're a crazy person like I am that just needs it to be here like it should have been, today should be draft day eve. It should be draft day eve.
I'm sorry, right, Jake. I'm sorry.
It should be draft day eve, and I'm pissed off and I'm losing my mind over it. So trust me, we've got 7 days to go. We still have so much more to cover. This next week is going to be a whirlwind, and we can't wait to talk about it. Continue to follow the show on LAC_Unleashed, myself at JT Hefner, and of course Dan Wolkenstein at Chargers Homer. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Chargers Unleashed.
Safe to dance.